So pretty incredible scenes in Westminster this week as MPs return to work and try to vote in a socially distanced way. Members of Parliament had to queue right through the Palace of Westminster, forming effectively a conga, which even stretched outside. Luckily, it wasn't raining at the time. This all came after the government decided it wouldn't renew the measures that had allowed MPs to vote and participate in debates from home. And it's left some MPs, those who are shielding and unable to take part, pretty angry. One of those MPs is Labour's Dame Margaret Hodge, who joins us now. You've said that the change of rules has left you disenfranchised. What do you mean?
Absolutely. Well, we've won a bit of a victory, Sophie, in that the government decided at the end of last week that those of us who can't go in by reason of age, or because we've got underlying conditions, or because members of our family have got underlying conditions, or because they're women who are pregnant, or because they've got children at home who aren't at school, all sorts of reasons, we can vote by proxy. But I have to say, I think watching last week, it was a Gilbert and Sullivan farce rather than serious Westminster processes that were taking place. And what's happening this week, which makes me so angry, I'm now allowed to vote, but I can't take part in debates around legislation. So tomorrow there is a debate on virtual access, and I would like to virtually take part in that debate. I've been told I can't do that, so I am being disenfranchised and discriminated against on a debate that is discussing my disenfranchisement and my discrimination. It's just a nonsense.
And the government, I guess, would argue that at a time when they're asking people to start to go back to work, MPs need to set an example, and there are certain things that MPs do that are very difficult to do properly remotely. I mean, do you think they've got a point?
Listen, there are two or three things. I want to get back as quickly as possible, but I want to get back when it's safe. And also, we've all been working really hard. We've just found new ways of working, as indeed you have. So it's very interesting how I now work virtually, have virtual surgeries, virtual coffee afternoons, virtually. And I do feel I've been representing my constituents well. The third thing is it hard to do? Well, the voting is dead easy. The voting is totally straightforward. And I have to say to you, much more efficient to do it virtually than having that ridiculous snake going right through Westminster Hall and out into the square outside Parliament. And on the actual debate, it's clunky. Bits of it are clunky, but we are getting better. And anybody who watched the liaison committee, where the Prime Minister was held to account by the chairs of the select committee, will say, actually, it worked rather well. So we've got a lot to learn. We can get better. But just because it's a bit clunky, is that a good enough reason for excluding so many MPs like myself who want to take part? Let me take an instance, Sophie. I've made tax justice one of the causes that I pursue in Parliament. We had a list published at the end of last week of £16 billion that was awarded to over 50 large corporations in loans by the government, taxpayers' money. Among that list were people like Tottenham Hotspur, where you've got a billionaire owner who lives in a tax haven, and companies. One German-based chemical company, BASF, got over £1 billion. I want to hold the government to account about that. I know about that. I've made it my speciality. And yet I'm being prevented to doing so by rules that have been brought in not to make Parliament more accountable and better, but actually, I think, political, not public good reasons.
Interesting you say that it's a political decision. What exactly do you mean by that? Why do you think that there is this resistance?
Well, if you look at PMQs, as you obviously have, and so have I over the last few weeks, and you've seen Boris Johnson against Keir Starmer. Boris Johnson's always looking over his shoulder. He can't operate without a crowd behind him braying to support him, whereas Keir Starmer has been absolutely excellent at, in a very detailed way, challenging the government and actually making some gains, for example, on the issue of health workers, paying that extra bit of the surcharge. because they were also here on immigrant visas. So that we got rid of that. That was through the accountability. I think this is about getting the crowds behind Boris at PMQs rather than good governance. And ironically, Sophie, on even that point, the Speaker has been absolutely clear. He's not going to make the chamber unsafe, and therefore only 50 people are allowed in the chamber at any one time. Can I make one more important point? MPs aren't employees. We're there because we're elected. Were we employees, what the government is actually doing is probably breaking 3 bits of legislation that they themselves passed. So it's the health and safety legislation, which is not just about conditions in the chamber, but how you get to work. It's the equality legislation, failing to make the reasonable adjustments so that everybody can take part, whatever their condition, and it's human rights legislation. Isn't it outrageous that a government that introduces legislation through the House then takes it upon itself to ignore or find a loophole so that it acts against the legislation and certainly against the spirit of the legislation?
OK, Dame Margaret Hodge, clearly some strong feelings on this issue. Thank you very much for being on the programme today.
Thank you.